Hello there everyone, this is uxwbill again, and it's time to venture in once again to my clock radio collection. Yes, as if I needed another collection, apparently I have one because I got to thinking about these the other day, and it turns out that I do indeed have quite a few of them. Well, this one is not only a fairly unique piece, it's also another example of a survivor. You see, I had a big nasty basement flood in 2004, and this thing was on my particle board computer desk in the furnace room, which I was using as a sort of makeshift office for my freelance consulting activities. Well, you know what happens to particle board furniture when it gets wet? It disintegrates. And so it did indeed disintegrate. It dumped everything that was on it onto the floor, including this poor radio, which fortunately at the time was not hooked up to anything. But it spent several days hanging from the phone cord that ran up into the ceiling, halfway submerged in icky sewage water, because here we have a combined sewer and storm sewer system, so the water in our basement was pretty nasty. Well, I got to thinking about this thing when I made my 24-hour clock radio video, and I finally got the time to take it down from where I'd stashed it in the basement. When the desk fell apart, I didn't want this thing getting pitched, and I didn't really want anybody to find it and decide to pitch it. So I stuffed it up on top of a furnace pipe, and there it sat since 2004. Well, the other night, I finally gave it the restoration that it deserves. I cleaned all the flood muck off of it, and now I present the fully operational General Electric 7-4700 FM/AM clock radio and telephone. Now, I have no idea why anybody would want a noisy, intrusive telephone in their bedroom, but I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that once upon a time, before I knew better, I put a big old Western Electric phone in my room and turned the ringer all the way up to max, and it woke me up rather smartly one morning. And ever since then, I think I might have inadvertently shaped my opinion of telephones in bedrooms, because I took that thing out pretty quickly. But that's exactly what this is. This is a clock radio combined with a touch-tone telephone. And interestingly, although the handset connections are freely removable and replaceable, the connection to the telephone line is hardwired. Now, you could always go inside the unit and repair it if you had to. There's nothing to stop a person from doing that. And General Electric certainly decided to do their part by adding another function to this thing, a measuring device. The only thing they didn't do is delineate this in some unit of measurement, because I'm pretty sure there's like, what, a mile worth of telephone cord here? Just go down and plug this into the central switching office. That's all you'd have to do.
That big!
So the first thing to examine on this thing is the clock functionality. This thing has a 12-hour clock in it, keeps time AM, PM. It has the ability to wake you to music or wake you to an alarm, and of course it allows you to set the time. And you can choose what you want to do by pressing the display button here. For example, if I press it once, the dot down there by set time lights up, and I can set the clock. Now, the clock supports forward setting, reverse setting, and it also supports fast settings. The interesting thing about the fast button, you might expect that it would only go in one direction, and that would be forward, but that's not quite true. When you press the fast button, it defaults to forward, but if you press the reverse button and then the fast button, it will go backwards, which is really quite a nice little feature to build into the clock logic of this unit. If you press display again, you get the opportunity to set the alarm to the desired time. Pressing display a third time returns the unit to the normal timekeeping mode, and there's not much special to say about that. There is a snooze button, and of course they left off the E just like they did on the 24-hour radio that I also have. As for the radio itself, when you turn the radio on, the dial lights up. Now, the dial itself doesn't light up, but the needle pointer certainly does, which is better than nothing. And it lights up green, and I'll talk more about that later. Let's go ahead and turn the volume up here. This thing seems to have, about a 3-inch speaker in it, I'd say, being fairly generous with the measurements. It doesn't sound bad. As you can see, it's definitely optimized for right-hand use, but I'll try anyway here. The plastic cabinet lets it down, otherwise it's really got quite a nice sound.
We were born in this
surprised how many stations are coming in tonight.
Always abounding in the work of the Lord for as much.
Yeah, no rap. No thanks. Wow, that station's about 50 miles from here, so it's doing really well considering it's just got an antenna built into the power cord. Let's go ahead and try the AM section on this thing, which isn't too fancy. It doesn't do anything special. Of course, the FM section doesn't either. There's a lot of computer hash in this house, so I don't know how much it'll pick up.
With F, blank Casey Anthony, and
Not really getting a whole lot tonight. Oh, there we go. There's something.
yeah, sign up for it, but we'll mention her name again, and I'm sure a lot of I don't even know. I can't remember what it was about. Ended up being a great guy and a great program director that I worked for, but that was her.
So there's the radio functionality, and of course the radio is turned on or off by simply pressing the radio button, at which point the dial light will go out. Now what happens if you're unfortunate enough to be listening to the radio and you get a call on this thing? Well, General Electric's designers thought of that. So let's go ahead and put the radio back on here. Find a station. There we go. And we'll say the phone rings. So I pick it up, and the dial light turns red, and the radio is muted. Now the interesting thing about this handset does not, the hook switch in this handset is not actually responsible for the muting in this little radio. The muting is actually handled here by this separate switch. So it's possible to press this switch down and cause the radio to come back on while the telephone handset continues to work. The telephone handset has a ringer volume control, a touch-tone keypad, a place for your phone number. It does have a light that shines down over the keys, an LED light, and the reason that's not working is because I don't presently have it hooked up to a telephone line. On the side, there is a microphone mute button to cut off the audio from the telephone handset in case you have to say something sensitive to your other half or the secret agents that have descended upon your bedroom in the middle of the night to ask you to call your adversary and get him or her to spill the beans. Anyway, that's pretty much all there is to the telephone. The ringer itself is built into the telephone, and if I'm remembering things correctly, it is a shrill electronic tone, but we'll try that out later because I've got the key keeper along to help me. And as soon as I've hooked this thing up to the phone, I'll go ahead and do a demonstration of the telephone functionality. Of course, I'll have to wire it in directly because if I ever find the end of this, maybe this thing told a lot of lies when it was younger because it looks like it got Pinocchio telephone wire. I cut the end off of the phone wiring. I cut the RJ11 modular plug off of there because I wanted to wire it directly into the home's phone system, which was a great idea at the time, but now it means a lot of work for me because I've got to go down on the kitchen baseboard and hook it up again. So that's not going to be a whole lot of fun, but I can definitely do that. There are a couple other unique features of this thing. First of all, the display brightness is definitely adjustable, but you get to choose more than just high or low. There is actually a brightness potentiometer on the back of it that gives you an essentially unlimited range of adjustment for the brightness of the clock display. I went ahead and as part of this thing's resurrection, I gave it a complete cleaning of all the operating controls. So this thing is operating nice and smoothly, as is the volume control and the tuning band switch. But let's go ahead and have a demonstration of the telephone part here. I'll hook that thing up and then I'll get the key keeper in to help me out. Alright, so let's go ahead and try this whole telephone thing. Now, unfortunately, I won't be able to talk to the key keeper, who apparently needs the alarm clock to go off right about now, because I don't have a DSL filter on this phone, so I can hear the hissing and screeching noises
of my YouTube upload.
Yeah, that the DSL modem is making right now. But hopefully this thing will ring anyway. So take it away, key keeper. Let's see what happens here. Probably nothing good. Alright, we had a little technical difficulty the first time around. Let's try this again. Keykeeper, take it away.
With pleasure.
And you can definitely hear that hash in there. So I need to get a filter on that thing if I'm going to use it regularly. But there you have the telephone functions, the radio functions, and a complete overview of the General Electric 7-4700 FM/AM clock radio with telephone. There is one more thing I would like to ask people about, though, and that is the date of manufacture of this thing. You see, my dad bought this thing brand new, and I presume it was sometime in the 1980s. Can anybody tell me when this thing was manufactured based on the date code here, which is 2348? And this handset is model number 2-9101A, in case anybody's wondering about that. So that's pretty much everything there is to it. There is one more thing I'm going to do before I close this video up. I'm going to pop the cover on this thing and show you some of the more interesting aspects of its internal construction. Alright, so the preparations to take this thing apart. First thing you have to do, you have to remove the AM and FM frequency selector switch handle, and you have to remove the three knobs, volume, tuning, and the brightness one at the back. And then you're almost home free if you ever decide to take one of these apart yourself. Now I removed the telephone handset, but you don't have to do that yourself. You probably want to start at the back when it comes to removing the cover from this thing, because up here in the front there's a ground wire connected to the control panel, probably there to protect the electronics from any sudden electrostatic discharge or anything like that. There we go, now you can see it a whole lot better. And this thing, probably because General Electric actually intended this thing to be serviced back in the day, just simply comes unplugged, and then you can lay the top half of it aside. And then you're left looking at the circuit board in here. Now the first thing on the circuit board that we look at is the clock, and you can see that there are 4 7-segment digits in here, 2 little dots there, 2 little dots there, and this thing over here that specifies what mode of waking up you've selected is a separate display all its own. Now an interesting thing, I've always been curious, you know, because this last 7 segment is in theory almost completely unused except for the 2 rightmost sideways segments on it. So I've peeled a couple of these things off to see if there were little LED chips underneath these. And the funny thing is, there usually aren't. So even though the things are there, the openings, the cutouts, or the holes, or whatever you want to call them, there is not anything behind them to light up. I suppose it saves the manufacturer a penny or two. The phone line comes in directly to the back of the unit, right alongside the power cord, goes through a strain relief thing, and then goes straight to the telephone handset. Here's the switch that cuts off the radio. And then the power cord comes in through another strain relief. Comes in back here by the power transformer. There is no compensation for 50 or 60 cycles operation on this thing. And there is no provision for it to run from 220 or 240 volts AC. There is, however, a little FM antenna wrapped around the power cord and an AM loop stick over here. There's the speaker, variable capacitor for the tuning, various radio ICs, alignment adjustments, stuff like that that's better not to be played with, the volume control, the band switch. But what's really interesting is the clock mechanism. The clock mechanism is very unique in that there's not a dedicated controller chip. This looks like something straight out of a cheap Chinese clock. There's actually a little blob on the back of the display board that is the entire clock controller. Well, that's about everything there is to say about this thing. The Handycam says its battery's running dead, so I'm going to shut this down, edit this, and upload it. Thank you for watching. Feel free to leave a comment below.